Lightning split a massive boulder on a farm. What the farmer found inside shocked everyone. The small, quiet farm of John Harris sat on the outskirts of a village that had seen few events to shake its calm existence. John had lived there for most of his life, working hard day after day to maintain his crops and livestock. His farm was his pride and joy, and he took great pride in his simple lifestyle. The land had been passed down through generations of his family, each one working it the same way. It was a peaceful life until that one stormy evening that changed everything. It was a late summer evening, and the sky had been clear up until a few moments ago. The sun began to set behind the hills, and the air grew thick with the promise of rain. The sky darkened rapidly, and within minutes, the calm evening transformed into a violent storm. Clouds swirled together, and the winds picked up, whipping the trees and bending the tall crops in the fields. John had been working in the barn when he first noticed the change in the weather. He knew how quickly storms could roll in, especially during the summer months. He had seen it all before, but this storm felt different. The wind howled like a wild animal, and the air felt heavy with an unusual energy, as if the very atmosphere was charged with electricity. John paused in his work, wiping his brow as he stepped outside to get a better look. The storm was fierce. The sky flickered with bright flashes of lightning, and thunder rumbled through the air with a low, menacing growl. It was one of those storms that made you feel small, as though nature itself was reminding you of its power. As the first bolt of lightning struck in the distance, John's attention was drawn to something unusual, a massive boulder sitting at the far end of his property, near the edge of the field. This boulder had been there for as long as he could remember. It was a landmark on his farm, one of those features that you don't really think about until something brings it to your attention. But tonight, with the storm raging around it, the boulder looked strange, almost as if it were waiting for something to happen. John squinted through the rain and wind, watching the boulder as the storm seemed to intensify. The lightning began to strike more frequently, its flashes lighting up the landscape in brief, blinding bursts. Then it happened. A flash of lightning so bright, so intense that it lit up the entire sky. It came down with incredible force, hitting the boulder directly. The sound of the strike was deafening, like 1,000 thunderclaps all at once. For a moment the air itself seemed to freeze, and then there was a sound that echoed through the storm, a loud cracking, followed by the sound of stone shattering. John's heart raced as he watched the boulder split in half right before his eyes. The force of the lightning had done something to it, something he couldn't explain. The boulder didn't just crack, it exploded into two massive pieces, sending debris scattering across the ground. A strange, otherworldly glow seemed to come from the inside of the boulder as it lay there, split open by the violent strike. John stood frozen in place, unsure of what he had just witnessed. The storm raged around him, but his focus was entirely on the boulder. What had just happened? Was it possible that the lightning had split the stone? Or was something else going on? He could hardly believe what he was seeing. For a few moments, John simply stood there, staring at the wreckage of the boulder, still glowing faintly in the fading light of the storm. The rain poured down harder now, but John barely noticed. He was too captivated by what had just occurred. He had lived on this farm his entire life, and he had never seen anything like this. What had the lightning done to the stone? What could possibly have caused it to break apart like that? As the rain began to lessen and the storm started to subside, John found himself slowly walking toward the site of the lightning strike. The air was thick with the smell of wet earth and ozone. He moved cautiously, still uncertain about what he would find when he reached the boulder. The ground was slippery from the rain, and the rocks were slick underfoot. But he pressed on, driven by a mix of curiosity and a sense of urgency. The glow from the boulder still pulsed faintly in the darkening evening, beckoning him closer. When he finally reached the split boulder, he could see that the interior was like nothing he had ever seen before. The stone had shattered, revealing something hidden deep inside it. At first, it seemed like just a mass of jagged rocks, but as John looked closer, he saw that there was something embedded in the center of the boulder. A strange object, unlike anything he had ever encountered. It was metallic, its surface reflecting the faint light of the storm. The object seemed to hum with an energy that John could feel in the air around him. He reached out, hesitating for just a moment, unsure of what he was about to touch. But something inside him told him to keep going. This was important. He had to know what this was. With a deep breath, John carefully began to pry the object from the boulder, using a piece of broken stone to help lift it free. It came loose with surprising ease, as though the stone had been waiting for him to take it. He held it in his hands, examining it closely. It was small, no larger than a fist, but its surface was unlike any metal he had ever seen. It had an almost iridescent quality, shifting colors as it caught the remaining light. The edges were smooth, and the design was intricate, as though it had been crafted by an advanced hand. It was beautiful in a way that was almost unsettling, and it felt wrong in a way he couldn't explain. John turned the object over in his hands, his mind racing with questions. What was this? Where had it come from? And how had it ended up inside the boulder on his farm? The lightning strike had obviously played some part in this, but he couldn't begin to understand how or why. For a moment, he simply stood there, holding the object in his hands, the weight of it grounding him as the last of the storm passed, and the night grew quiet. As the rain stopped completely, and the clouds parted to reveal a sky full of stars, John knew that his life would never be the same. Whatever had happened here, whatever this object was, it was the beginning of something far bigger than he could ever have imagined. He could feel it in the pit of his stomach, a sense of foreboding mixed with excitement. He had found something that no one else had ever seen, something that had been hidden for who knows how long, and now it was in his hands. But what would he do with it? John stood there for a few more minutes, staring at the object, trying to make sense of it all. But no matter how much he thought about it, no answers came. So with one final glance at the now silent farm, he turned and walked back to the house. Tomorrow, he would have to figure out what to do next. But for tonight, all he could do was wonder about the mystery he had just uncovered, and what it would mean for his future. This was just the beginning, and whatever came next would be something he could never have prepared for. John sat in his small, modest living room, staring at the object he had retrieved from the boulder. It was now resting on the wooden table in front of him, glowing faintly in the dim light of the evening. The storm had passed, leaving behind a crisp, clear night, but his mind was still swirling with questions. He couldn't stop thinking about what had happened. How had the lightning split the boulder? What was this strange, metallic object that now lay in front of him? The more he stared at it, the more its mysterious allure seemed to grow. The object was small, no larger than the size of his palm, but it had a weight to it that felt significant. Its surface shimmered with a strange iridescence, changing colors in the light. It almost seemed to pulse with an energy that John could feel in his fingertips as he touched it. He couldn't explain it, but there was something about it that felt important. He had no idea where it had come from or how it had ended up inside the boulder, but something told him that this wasn't just some random occurrence. This was something much bigger. John leaned back in his chair, running his fingers through his hair, trying to make sense of everything. He had lived on this farm his whole life, and nothing like this had ever happened before. Sure, there had been the occasional storm that caused some damage or the odd bit of bad luck here and there, but nothing that had left him standing in the middle of a field, holding an ancient-looking object pulled from a shattered boulder. It just didn't make sense. His mind wandered back to the moment when the lightning had struck. The crack of thunder had been deafening, the bright flash of light so intense it had lit up the whole sky. And then the boulder had split open. John could still hear the sound of stone breaking, the crack of the earth, and the strange, almost otherworldly glow that had come from the boulder's interior. He had never seen anything like it in his life. He had always heard stories, of course, stories of strange finds and unexplained phenomena, but he never imagined he would be the one to experience something like this. But now, here he was, holding the evidence in his hands. The object was something that didn't belong in this world. It was too advanced, too smooth, and too perfectly crafted. It wasn't something that could be made by hand, at least not by any human hands John knew of. He could tell it was ancient, but its design was something else entirely. The more he thought about it, the more questions piled up in his mind. Was it a relic from a lost civilization, a piece of technology from some far-off place? Or was it something else entirely, something that had been waiting for the right moment to be discovered? John's thoughts were interrupted by a knock at the door. He stood up quickly, still holding the object in his hand, as if it were a fragile piece of glass. He wasn't expecting anyone, and the unexpected visitor made him even more nervous. He had no idea what this object meant, but he was sure of one thing. It was important. It was far too strange to ignore, and he was beginning to realize that it might change everything. When John opened the door, he was met with the familiar face of his neighbor, Mary. She was a kind woman, older than him by a few years, but someone he trusted. She had been living next door for as long as he could remember, and the two of them often helped each other with various tasks around the farm. But tonight, she looked concerned, almost worried. "John, are you all right?" she asked, peering into his house. "I saw the lightning strike and I heard the noise. What happened out there?" John hesitated. He didn't want to tell anyone about the object just yet. He didn't know enough about it, and he didn't want to risk anyone else getting involved until he had a clearer understanding of what he was dealing with. But Mary was a curious soul, and he could tell she wasn't going to let it go that easily. "I'm fine, Mary," John said, trying to sound calm. "There was a lightning strike and the boulder at the edge of the field split open. I just went out to check it out." Mary raised an eyebrow. "A boulder split open? I've lived here for years and I've never seen anything like that before. Are you sure you're all right? It sounds strange." John nodded, trying to play it cool. "I'm all right, just a little shaken up. I found something inside the boulder, though. It's hard to explain." Mary stepped forward, her curiosity piqued. "What did you find?" John paused. He didn't want to reveal too much just yet, but he could see that Mary wasn't going to leave without some kind of explanation. He stepped back and motioned for her to come inside. She followed him into the living room, her eyes scanning the room until they landed on the object lying on the table. Her eyes widened as she took in the sight of the metallic object. "What is that?" she asked, her voice filled with wonder. "It doesn't look like anything I've ever seen before." John shrugged, still unsure of what to say. "I'm not sure. It was inside the boulder. When the lightning hit it, cracked open, and this was inside." Mary leaned closer, inspecting the object with a look of fascination. "It looks ancient," she said softly, "but it also looks out of place. Where did it come from?" John shook his head, frustrated. "That's the question, isn't it? I don't know, but it doesn't belong here. It's too advanced." Mary nodded slowly, her mind clearly racing. "You should tell someone about this. Maybe someone who knows more about these things. This isn't just a random find, John. This could be something important." John looked at her, his mind torn. He had already thought about telling someone, but he was hesitant. He didn't want to get caught up in something he didn't fully understand. But the more he thought about it, the more he realized Mary was right. He couldn't just keep this to himself. He had to find out what it was and what it meant. "I'll think about it," John finally said. "But for now, I think I need to keep it to myself." Mary seemed to accept his answer for the time being, but she was still clearly intrigued by the object. "Just be careful, John. Whatever it is, it doesn't seem like something that's meant to be found." With that, she left, and John was left alone once more with the object. He sat back down at the table, staring at it. The silence in the room felt heavy, and the object on the table seemed to be calling to him. He didn't know what would come next, but one thing was clear. His life had changed forever, and whatever this object was, it was only the beginning of something much bigger. He just didn't know yet how deep the mystery would go or what kind of answers or dangers lay ahead. The days that followed John's discovery were a blur. He couldn't shake the feeling that his life had shifted in a way he couldn't fully comprehend. Each morning, as he walked out into the fields to check on the crops or tend to the animals, he couldn't stop thinking about the strange object hidden within the boulder. The storm, the lightning strike, and the object, it all seemed too unreal. And yet, it was real. It had happened, and now John had it in his hands, a constant reminder of the mystery that had entered his life without warning. The more he thought about it, the more questions piled up in his mind. Where had the object come from? What was it made of? Why had it been hidden in the boulder, waiting to be discovered? He had never been one to believe in supernatural things or conspiracy theories, but this was something different. This object was unlike anything he had ever seen before, and the fact that it had been inside a boulder that had been struck by lightning only added to its mystery. John had spent the past few days keeping the object hidden, carefully wrapping it in cloth and storing it in a small box in his barn. He hadn't told anyone else about it, not even Mary. While she had been curious, John knew she wasn't the type to keep secrets, and he wasn't ready to share this with anyone just yet. He needed time to figure it out for himself. But the more time that passed, the more John realized that he couldn't solve this on his own. The object was too strange, too out of place. He needed answers, and he needed help. He had heard rumors over the years, stories about strange occurrences and mysterious discoveries, but he never thought much of them. People would talk and the stories would fade away, forgotten with time. But this was different. This wasn't just some tall tale. It was real, and it was sitting in his barn waiting for him to understand it. John knew that if he didn't take action soon, he might never get to the bottom of the mystery. The thought of reaching out to someone for help made John uneasy. He wasn't the type of person who easily trusted others, especially when it came to something so important. But he also knew that keeping the object to himself wasn't going to solve anything. If anything, it might only make things worse. There were too many questions, too many unknowns, and he couldn't bear the thought of not knowing what this object was or where it came from. After much deliberation, John decided to reach out to someone who might be able to help, someone who could offer expertise in the areas he didn't understand. He thought about a few options, but eventually settled on an archaeologist named Dr. Evelyn Walker. He had heard of her before. She was well known in the local area for her work in uncovering historical artifacts and studying ancient cultures. If anyone could help him make sense of this object, it was Dr. Walker. It took John a few days to gather the courage to make the call. He knew that once he contacted her, there would be no turning back. He would have to share what he had found, and he would have to deal with the consequences. But the more he thought about it, the more he realized that he had no other choice. If this object was as important as he thought, he couldn't just keep it hidden forever. When he finally dialed Dr. Walker's number, his hands shook slightly, though he tried not to let it show. The phone rang a few times before a voice answered on the other end. "Hello, this is Dr. Walker." Hello," John said, his voice a little rough. "This is John Harris. I've got something I think you might want to see." There was a pause on the other end, and then Dr. Walker responded. "Go on." John explained the situation as best as he could, telling her about the lightning strike, the boulder, and the object he had found inside. He could hear her interest growing as he spoke, her voice becoming more animated with each word. When he finished, there was a brief silence before she spoke again. "I'm intrigued," she said. "I'll need to see this object for myself. When can I come by?" John gave her directions to the farm and told her that she could come the next morning. He wasn't sure what he was expecting, but he knew that meeting Dr. Walker would be a turning point. He had no idea what kind of answers she might provide, but he hoped that her expertise would help him make sense of everything. The night before Dr. Walker arrived, John couldn't sleep. He tossed and turned, his mind racing with thoughts about the object. What would she think? Would she recognize it as something valuable, or would she dismiss it as nothing more than a curiosity? Would she be able to help him understand it, or would she be just as baffled as he was? When morning finally came, John was up before the sun, preparing for Dr. Walker's visit. He made coffee and paced around his living room, checking the time every few minutes. He wasn't sure why he felt so nervous. It wasn't like he had anything to hide. But there was something about the situation that made him uneasy. The object was not just a physical thing. It was a symbol of something much larger, something that John couldn't fully grasp. Finally, at around 10 in the morning, Dr. Walker arrived. She was a tall woman in her late 40s, with short-cropped brown hair and sharp, intelligent eyes. She wore a simple blouse and khaki pants, her outfit practical and well-suited for the task ahead. She greeted John with a firm handshake, and they exchanged pleasantries before John led her to the barn where he had kept the object hidden. As they entered the barn, Dr. Walker's eyes immediately landed on the box where the object was stored. John carefully lifted the cloth off the top of the box, revealing the object inside. Dr. Walker's gaze remained focused on it for a long moment before she spoke. "This is extraordinary," she said softly. "I've never seen anything like it." John felt a surge of hope. Finally, someone who understood. Dr. Walker took the object into her hands, studying it closely. She turned it over, running her fingers along its surface as if trying to detect its secrets. "I've seen ancient artifacts, but this..." She shook her head in disbelief. "This is unlike anything I've ever encountered. The craftsmanship, the materials, this doesn't belong to any civilization I know of." John felt a rush of excitement. "You think it's old? Really old?" Dr. Walker nodded. "This could be from a time long before any known civilization. Or it could be something entirely different. We need to examine it more thoroughly, of course, but I believe this could be a major discovery." John's heart raced. The weight of the situation began to sink in. This wasn't just a strange find. This was something important, something that could change everything. He had known it from the moment he first held the object in his hands, but hearing Dr. Walker's confirmation made it all the more real. "Do you think it could be from another civilization?" John asked, almost afraid to voice the question. It sounded ridiculous to him even as he said it out loud. But Dr. Walker didn't dismiss the idea. "It's possible," she said. "I've studied many ancient artifacts, but this has features that are beyond anything from this world. We'll need to run some tests, of course, but I think we're dealing with something far older and far more significant than you might imagine." John could hardly believe what he was hearing. This was it, the beginning of something huge. But as he looked at Dr. Walker, he realized that the true nature of this discovery was still unknown. The questions were just beginning, and the answers, if they came at all, could change everything. But one thing was certain: John's life would never be the same again. John couldn't believe how much had changed in just a few days. The quiet farm that had once felt like a sanctuary for his simple, peaceful life was now the center of a whirlwind of questions, speculation, and excitement. Dr. Evelyn Walker's visit had been the first step, but things were moving faster than he had anticipated. What had started as a curiosity, the strange object inside the boulder, had quickly become something much larger. After Dr. Walker's initial inspection, she had promised to conduct a series of tests to learn more about the object. She assured John that she would be thorough, but also warned him that they might not have immediate answers. Still, just the fact that she had taken the object so seriously filled him with a sense of purpose. He wasn't crazy. What he had found was important. It wasn't just some oddity. It was something that could change everything. Over the next few days, John found himself constantly checking his phone, waiting for an update from Dr. Walker. He kept busy on the farm, taking care of his daily chores, but his mind was always on the object. He had started to look at everything differently, as though the very land he had worked for so many years was hiding secrets he had never noticed. The boulder, the lightning, the strange metallic object, it was all connected in ways he couldn't fully understand. Finally, a week later, Dr. Walker called him with an update. John's heart skipped a beat as he picked up the phone. "John," she said, her voice calm but tinged with excitement, "we've learned a few things. I need you to come down to the lab as soon as possible. It's important." John didn't hesitate. He had been waiting for this moment. He immediately set off to meet her, the distance between his farm and her office feeling longer than ever. As he drove, his mind raced with possibilities. What had they found? Could it be that the object was even more significant than they had originally thought? When he arrived at Dr. Walker's office, she was already waiting for him. Her face was serious, but there was a spark in her eyes. She motioned for him to sit down, and he did so, his hands resting nervously in his lap. "I've been analyzing the object," she began, "and I have to tell you, John, this is not something from this time, or even from any known history. The materials are unlike anything we've ever seen before." John's heart pounded in his chest. He leaned forward, eager to hear more. "What do you mean?" he asked. "Is it from an ancient civilization?" Dr. Walker nodded, but her expression grew more thoughtful. "It's possible," she said slowly, "but it's also possible that it's something entirely different, something beyond what we currently understand. The metals it's made from are not only unknown to us, they also don't appear to belong to any natural deposits on Earth. They've been altered, shaped in ways that suggest advanced technology. This isn't just ancient, it could be something foreign." John's mind was reeling. "Foreign," he repeated, trying to grasp what she was saying. Dr. Walker sighed, running a hand through her hair. "I know this sounds far-fetched, but the possibility can't be ignored. The way the object was formed, the precision of its structure, it's unlike anything humans have ever created. It's possible this could be of extraterrestrial origin or something from another civilization entirely." John sat back in his chair, stunned. He had wondered about this, of course. He had thought about the idea of the object being something not of this world, but hearing Dr. Walker say it out loud made it feel all too real. The object wasn't just a relic of the past. It could be evidence of something far greater, something beyond his wildest imagination. Dr. Walker continued, "We've sent some samples to a few colleagues in the field of material science and physics. The results are perplexing. The object's composition defies the laws of known science in some ways. But there's one thing I can tell you for sure: it's not from here, not from Earth at least. John's thoughts were racing. "What do we do now?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Doctor." Walker looked at him seriously. "We continue our research. This is just the beginning, John. We have to be careful about how we proceed. This object could be far more important than we realize, and we don't yet understand all the implications of what it could mean." John nodded. He knew she was right. The discovery was only the first step, and there were far more questions that needed to be answered. But the more he thought about it, the more he realized that the answers weren't just for him. They were for the world. This object, whatever it was, could change everything. It could reshape humanity's understanding of history, technology, and even the universe. Over the following weeks, Dr. Walker and her team worked tirelessly to learn more about the object. They performed tests, consulted experts, and compared their findings to everything they could think of. But despite their best efforts, the object remained a mystery. No one had ever seen anything like it, and its origins were as elusive as ever. Meanwhile, word of the discovery began to spread. News outlets caught wind of the research, and soon, John's quiet farm became the subject of media attention. Scientists, journalists, and curious onlookers began flocking to the area, all eager to learn more about the mysterious object and its potential significance. At first, John had been uncomfortable with the attention. He had never sought the spotlight, and the thought of his private life being exposed to the world made him uneasy. But as time went on, he realized that the discovery was no longer just his. It belonged to everyone. One evening, as John was sitting on the porch looking out over the fields, he saw headlights approaching in the distance. A car pulled up to the driveway, and he recognized it immediately. It was Dr. Walker. He had been expecting her, but the visit still caught him off guard. He stood up as she walked toward him, her face serious but determined. "John," she said as she reached him, "we've hit a wall. The research has led us in circles, and we're no closer to understanding what this object is. But there's something I think we need to consider, something I didn't want to bring up before." John frowned, feeling a sense of dread creep over him. "What is it?" Dr. Walker hesitated, then looked him in the eye. "I think it's time to consider the possibility that this object wasn't just left here by chance. It might have been placed here on purpose." John's heart skipped a beat. "Placed here? By who?" Dr. Walker took a deep breath. "That's what we need to find out. But the more we study this object, the more it seems like it was waiting for someone to find it. The lightning, the boulder, it all feels like it was orchestrated. The question is, who did this? And why?" John felt a chill run down his spine. If the object had been placed there deliberately, it meant someone, or something, had intended for him to find it. The realization hit him hard. This wasn't just a random discovery. It was part of something much bigger, something beyond his understanding. And whoever or whatever was behind it had set this chain of events in motion. "We're not done, John," Dr. Walker continued, her voice firm. "This is only the beginning. We have to keep going no matter where it leads. We might not have all the answers yet, but we're getting closer. And I believe that this object, whatever it is, has the power to change everything." John looked at her, a sense of determination rising within him. The road ahead was uncertain, and the questions seemed endless. But he knew one thing for sure. He couldn't turn back now. The mystery had only just begun. Weeks had passed since Dr. Walker's visit, and the intensity of the investigation was beginning to wear on John. His once quiet life had been overtaken by the mystery of the object he had found in the boulder. Every day, more people came and went from his farm, from scientists to journalists, all eager to learn what they could about the strange artifact. But for John, it had become more than just a story. It was an obsession, a puzzle he couldn't solve on his own. He had come to realize that the object wasn't just a relic. It was a key to something larger than he could understand. Dr. Walker's team had continued their research, but despite their efforts, they hadn't made much progress. The materials that made up the object were unlike anything they had ever encountered, and the tests they had conducted only deepened the mystery. The object seemed to defy all known laws of science. The more they tried to understand it, the less they knew. It felt as if they were standing on the edge of something vast, something unknown, and the answers were just out of reach. John, meanwhile, had spent most of his days trying to keep the farm running. He had always been a man of routine, and the sudden flood of attention had disrupted his sense of normalcy. But he couldn't stop thinking about the object. It was always there in the back of his mind, no matter how hard he tried to focus on other things. The mystery of the object had become a part of him, a question he couldn't shake. One evening, as John was finishing his work on the farm, he saw a car pull up in the distance. It was getting late, and he wasn't expecting anyone, but as the headlights drew closer, he recognized the car. It was Dr. Walker, S. His heart skipped a beat. She had called earlier to say she was coming to give him an update, but he hadn't expected her to arrive so late. When she stepped out of the car, she looked different. There was a sense of urgency in her movements, a tension in her posture that John hadn't seen before. She walked quickly toward him, her face serious. "John," she said, her voice low, "we've made a breakthrough. We need to talk." John's stomach churned with anticipation. "A breakthrough?" he asked, unable to hide his excitement. "What did you find?" Dr. Walker motioned for him to follow her to the barn, where the object was still kept hidden away. The barn had become their makeshift lab, with various equipment scattered around and papers strewn across the tables. John followed her inside, his heart pounding in his chest. Once they were inside, Dr. Walker turned to him. "I think we've figured out what this object is. And more importantly, we think we know who might have placed it here." John's mind raced. "You've figured it out? How?" Dr. Walker smiled faintly, though it was clear that she was still processing everything herself. "It's not an object from an ancient civilization like we thought. It's something much more recent. It's technology, something far beyond anything we've ever seen before. But the strange thing is, it doesn't fit any known pattern of technological advancement. It's as if it's from a time that hasn't happened yet." John blinked, trying to absorb what she was saying. "Are you saying this object is from the future?" Dr. Walker nodded. "That's exactly what I'm suggesting. The materials, the design, it all points to something that's far ahead of anything we currently know. But there's one more thing." John leaned in, hanging on every word. "What is it?" "We've traced the origins of the object to a very specific place," Dr. Walker continued. "And it's not just a place, it's a time. This object, we believe, was deliberately placed here. It was left for someone to find, and it's not by accident that you, John, were the one to discover it." John's mind was spinning. "You're saying it was left for me, Doctor?" Walker hesitated. "Yes, we believe so, and we think it's part of something much larger. The question is, why you, why now?" John shook his head, trying to make sense of it all. "I don't understand. Why me? What does this have to do with me?" "That's what we need to figure out," Dr. Walker said. "But there's something else we've discovered, something that might help us understand what this object is really for." She reached into her bag and pulled out a small device. It looked like a handheld scanner of some sort with buttons and a small screen. "We've been running scans on the object, and we've detected something." John watched as she activated the device, the screen flickering to life. The device beeped softly, and Dr. Walker's eyes widened as she looked at the results. "There's something inside the object," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's like a hidden compartment, something that we didn't see before." John's breath caught in his throat. "A hidden compartment?" Dr. Walker nodded. "Yes, it's almost as if the object has another purpose, something we haven't uncovered yet. We think there's more to it than we initially realized. We need to open it." John felt a surge of adrenaline. The thought of discovering even more hidden inside the object made his pulse quicken. "How do we open it?" Dr. Walker handed him the scanner. "We've found a small access point on the side. We think we can use this device to unlock it, but we need to be careful. We don't know what we'll find." John took the device in his hands, feeling the weight of the moment. This was it, the next step in the journey. He had no idea what was inside the object, but he couldn't wait to find out. He carefully positioned the scanner on the object, following the instructions Dr. Walker had given him. The device hummed to life, and the screen blinked as it scanned the object. Then, with a soft click, the object's surface shifted. John felt his heart race as the hidden compartment slowly began to open. Inside, nestled within the strange metallic surface, was a small, delicate device, something that looked like a piece of advanced technology, but unlike anything John had ever seen. "Doctor." Walker stepped forward, her eyes wide with awe. "This is it," she whispered. "This is what we've been searching for." John reached for the device, carefully lifting it from its compartment. It was small, only about the size of his palm, but it pulsed with a soft, glowing light. It felt alive in his hands, as though it were responding to his touch. "What is it?" John asked, his voice thick with wonder. Dr. Walker was speechless for a moment, her eyes still fixed on the glowing object. Finally, she spoke, her voice filled with reverence. I don't know. But I think we've just uncovered the key to something that could change everything. This could be the breakthrough we've been waiting for. John stood there, holding the object, his mind spinning with possibilities. The discovery had only just begun, and yet it felt as though they had reached the edge of something much larger. The answers were still out of reach, but John knew one thing for certain. He couldn't turn back now. Whatever this object was, whatever it meant, it had set him on a path that would lead him to a future he couldn't even begin to imagine. As Dr. Walker looked at him, he realized that they were in this together now. The mystery had pulled them both into something bigger than either of them had expected. But one thing was clear. They were about to embark on a journey that would uncover secrets that could change everything, and nothing would ever be the same again.